There's a villain in a James Bond movie, one of the Pierce Brosnan James Bond movies, who has all these TV stations and newspapers and radio stations, and he is setting the world up to believe his version of reality so that he can get lots and lots of money and attention. And he brags to James Bond. Of course, this is when the bad guy brags right before he's killed. He brags to James Bond that he'll reach more people than God himself. And the best God ever managed was the Sermon on the Mount. I always love that line. It's it's one of those things that just it permeates everything. People who don't even necessarily know the Bible know about the Sermon on the Mount. They've heard about it. It's been referenced in cartoons and TV shows and books all over the place. And Matthew's version of the Sermon on the Mount is very, very beautiful. I mean, the entire book of Matthew is very, very beautiful. That's why it's at the beginning of the book, not because it was the first gospel written, because we know that the first gospel was actually Mark. It's at the beginning of the Gospels because it's the longest and it's the most beautiful. And it's the one people have the greatest time with when they're reading and they're trying to develop their faith journey, their spiritual journey. Well, we're not looking at Matthew's Sermon on the Mount today. We're looking at Luke's Sermon on the Plain, which is Luke's equivalent to Matthew. But there's a few things that are very, very different. First of all, the plain. We know about acoustics, and last week we saw Jesus in the boat, and from on high, voice can carry. We know all that. But there's something about the personal nature of this message when Jesus walks in the crowd. One of the things I do when I'm able to preach live for folks is I walk onto the floor of the congregation as much as I humanly can to speak. And I've had a lot of people comment how much they like me coming towards them, that I'm not some kind of voice up behind a bunch of furniture and away from everybody, that I come into the crowd and they feel like I'm talking to them. I imagine that is much like the people who heard the Sermon on the Plain felt when Jesus actually came to them to speak with them. They could almost touch him if they were close enough, because the message he wanted to deliver was significant. See, Matthew's is blessed are the poor in spirit. It was an internal work that you had to do, and that's important. But that wasn't Luke's focus. Remember, Luke is the social justice gospel. Luke is the one who tells Christians to get our hands dirty. Get in there, work for justice. If you see something wrong, fix it. If you see an injustice, do something to make it just. So Luke stands among the people, and the first thing he says is, blessed are the poor. That's it, not conditioned at all. Blessed are the poor, for they will get the reward. And in this passage, we have 4 blessings and 4 woes, and they kind of dovetail each other. They mirror each other, because for every blessing, there's an equal woe. So Jesus tells the poor that they will have plenty. And he tells the rich, you've had your time. You're going to do without. He doesn't condition that either. He doesn't soft pedal it. And then he says, those who are hungry, you're going to be fed. And those of you who are already full, you're going to go hungry for a while. Going on to those who weep, those who laugh, those who hate you, those who think you're popular and talk about you. All of these were teaching lessons so that the people who were on the underside of society had something to look forward to. But it was a reminder for the rich in society that they've had their time of fun and play and abundance. So this is the message of God's world that Luke is trying to make abundantly clear. He's not sugarcoating it for anybody. And he's also making clear that it is now. It's not, blessed are you who are hungry now, for in the future, when you get to the promised land, you get to heaven, you're going to have everything you want. That's not the message Luke is giving. Luke is saying, for you who are hungry now, the community that we're building, you are going to be fed. This is a present, imminent thing you will experience. Those of you who are fat cats, who have had plenty along the way, you're going to wait your turn. There's nothing in here that says those who are rich are going to be hungry for the rest of their lives or perpetuity or into the next world. That doesn't happen because Jesus is not cruel. But he does believe in balancing out the situation. So those who have an abundance, you're just going to cool your jets. you're going to have to experience a little bit of deprivation, a little bit of have not, while the people who have been living have not get some of the abundance that you've been taking for granted. And he talks to people who weep, who are desolate, who have a horrible, awful time, who might be mourning children or parents or loved ones, who might be struggling with health. So you will laugh, you will have joy right now, not eventually, right now. And those of you who laugh and have a grand old time, party's over. You're going to actually start to experience some of the bad things in life. You can't be isolated from that, the way money tends to isolate people from the harsh things. And finally, he says, those who speak poorly of you, speak awful of you, who insult you, who put you down, you're going to be raised up. You're going to be honored. And then he says, those of you who are popular, who everybody says great things about, all that hypocrisy you see in the towns, yeah, that's going to end. You're going to be treated the way you really are seen, not some lauded and fancy names just because you're considered so rich and wonderful that we have to praise you. The blessings and woes. I mean, the thing is that none of these are out of reach for everybody. It's imminent. It's the kind of kingdom, the community that Jesus is trying to create. And he invites both sides, because in the Hebrew people that he was talking to, there were people who were quite wealthy. There were people who were quite destitute. And the majority were somewhere in the middle, where they knew some of both existences. And he said, in the world to come, everybody is going to be in that middle place. That's the dream. That's the vision. Poor are not going to suddenly be rich. The rich are not suddenly going to be poor. But the rich are going to do without all their excess. And the poor are not going to be denied their basics. That's the world we want. It's the kind of world that we as a Western society have tried to create through laws, through government, through policy, through all sorts of stuff, this centering in the middle. When the middle empties out and all you get is the extreme rich and the extreme poor, we lose all over the place. And that's kind of the world we're living in right now, with the middle emptying out, and the poor are getting poorer, and the rich are getting richer. This is the exact opposite of the world Jesus asked us to help create. This is the exact opposite of the visionaries of our democracy in the West, of our types of government that had to share the wealth so that there would be a middle class, there would be a middle group of people where the majority of people would be, and we'd work on the edges to bring them in to the center. See, the thing with God's kingdom, the thing with the community Jesus is trying to tell us to create, is it is not out of the realm of the possible. It is not Harry, just down the road, wait to heaven, get whatever you want. And the people who try to convince others that their reward is a heavenly reward are totally wrong. It is not in the Bible that we have to wait for our comeuppance and our reward. It's just not in Scripture. Jesus tells us how that can happen. We have woes and blessings. We have other teachings that make that possible. But we, as the people who are part of Jesus' community here, because Jesus is not just here as a magician to wave the wand and it will happen. Jesus has been very blunt about the fact that it's a relationship. It's a community activity. We talked last week about the call of congregations to get out there and do the work. Well, this is a call too. It's a different kind of call. It's not a call about preaching the gospel to everyone. It's the call about making it happen, making the gospel happen for everybody. Because the ability to share is right within our hands. It is imminent, as Jesus promised. We make the choice to make that happen, or we make the choice to not make it happen. And how do we make those choices? Through our economic purchases, through the way we vote, through the comments we make to the people we're related to, the comments we make to the public at large. All of those tell our position about whether or not we want this community that Jesus has suggested, this community where there is plenty for everybody. Or do we want this radical schism where the poor and the rich just get further apart and the middle opens up and empties. Because that's kind of what's been happening for several generations now, and that's not the way it needs to go. We do not have to wait till the second coming to make this right. The promise is it can be made right now. The ability to do it is now. We've got it. The politics, the opportunity, the resources, we just have to have the will. And that's the challenging part. We prefer blessed are the poor in spirit because then we really don't have to do anything but work on ourselves. Luke does not let us off the hook that easily. Blessed are the poor. They've got greater access to God's love than those of you with abundance because you've isolated yourself. You think you're self-sufficient, that you think you don't need God, or you think you control the message if you have a lot. Jesus reminds us that's not how it's going to happen. That in this time, in this place, we can make it right. Blessed are the poor, woe to the rich. Everybody together makes the community.